Mr. Miller?
Present.
Mr. Janik?
Here.
Mr. Bukovac?
Here.
Make a motion to excuse Auditor Kukuka. He has a letter on file.
Thank you. Mr. Miller?
Second, please.
Motion is second on the floor to excuse Mr. Kukuka from tonight's meeting. He has a letter on file. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? He is excused. Move on to item 2, the prayer by Chaplain Masilk, and remain standing for item 3, the pledge of the flag by Sergeant Armstrong or Bukovac.
Will you bow with me, please? Gracious God, we ask your blessings upon this meeting tonight. Guide us, inspire us, keep us all within your care. Tonight we pray a special blessing upon the citizens of Taiwan as they rescue the survivors from the earthquake that occurred this past week. Protect the rescuers and those who will be tasked with rebuilding their communities. We pray, too, that you guide the voters in New Hampshire as they make their choices for national leadership. Bless us all, and now may the words of our mouths and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll move on to item 4, the consent agenda.
Minutes of the regular council meeting held January 25th, 2016. Minutes of the Finance Committee meeting held February 1st, 2016. Minutes of the Utilities Committee meeting held February 1st, 2016. Minutes of the Police and Fire Committee meeting held February 1st, 2016.
Mr. Miller.
Move to accept consent agenda.
Mr. Goodell.
Second.
Motion is second on the floor to accept the consent agenda as read. Are there any comments? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Goodell?
Yes.
Mr. Van Churen?
Yes.
Mrs. Wasilk?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Mr. Bukovac?
yes.
Thank you. That's completes item 4. Move on to item 5, acknowledgement of the public pertaining to items on tonight's agenda. Anyone wishing to speak that is on tonight's agenda? Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have an item in the second reading, 7A, and Mr. Oster has come to council in regards to this second reading. Is there a chance I could have him speak now, or would it be better to have him speak when we get to that item?
Speak when we get to that item.
Okay, that'll be fine. I appreciate that, and I have nothing further, Mr. President.
He could speak now if he wants to, but I think it'd be better
Okay.
wait till we get to that item.
Thank you, Mr. President. That'll be it.
Anyone else? If not, we'll move on to item 6, ordinances and resolutions. Yes, sir.
Yes, hi. I'm Pete Deskins, 45580 Telegraph Road.
Can I ask you to go to the podium and...
No,
Oh,
wait a
sure.
minute, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. Are you speaking on something on tonight's agenda?
No.
Well, you'll have to wait until the end of the meeting, sir.
Okay.
I'll call
No
for
problem.
that later on. Thank you. Move on to item 6, ordinances and resolutions. First reading, item A.
An ordinance to make appropriations for current expenses and other expenditures of the City of Amherst, State of Ohio during the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2016, repealing all ordinances in conflict herewith.
Mr. Winarski.
I'd like to ask this be sent for a second reading, please.
Thank you. Mr. Goodell.
Second.
Motion is second on the floor to send item A onto the second reading. Are there any comments? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Goodell?
Yes.
Mr. Van Churen?
Yes.
Mrs. Wasilk?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Mr. Bukovac?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Move on to item B.
An ordinance authorizing and directing the Safety Service Director to solicit bids for procurement of self-contained breathing apparatus and related equipment for the fire department, and authorizing and directing the Safety Service Director to award the contract for such work to the lowest responsive and responsible bidder and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Winarski.
With the understanding that passing this earlier gets the equipment to our fire department earlier, I'd like to ask that we suspend council rules and pass this on the first reading with emergency.
Thank you. Mr. Miller.
No better reason to suspend council rules. I second that.
Thank you. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Goodell?
Yes.
Mr. Van Kuren?
Yes.
Mrs. Wasilk?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Mr. Bukovac?
Yes.
Motion carries. Mr. Van Kuren.
Move to adopt.
Mr. Miller.
Second, please.
Motion is second on the floor to adopt. Roll call vote.
Mr. Goodell?
Yes.
Mr. Van Kuren?
Yes.
Mrs. Wasilk?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Mr. Bukovac?
Yes.
Motion carries.
It's ordinance 016-02.
Item C,
An ordinance authorizing the City of Amherst, Ohio to enter into an agreement with Everstream Solutions LLC for pole attachments of fiber optic cable and associated hardware.
Mr. Goodell.
I'd like to make a motion to take this on to the second reading.
Mr. Winarski.
I'll second that.
Motion is second on the floor to take item C onto the second reading. Are there any comments? Mr. Miller.
Yes, just like to thank administration for working on getting a contract hammered out with Everstream. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Goodell?
Yes.
Mr. Van Kuren?
Yes.
Mrs. Wasilk?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Mr. Bukovac?
Yes.
That completes item 6. Move on to item 7, ordinances and resolutions, second reading. Item A,
An ordinance to approve the second amendment to subdividers agreement between the City of Amherst, Ohio and Amherst Land Holding Company LLC, successor in interest to Oster Construction, Inc., relative to North Point Estates subdivision number 4, and approving the plat for the subdivision for recording purposes.
okay. Mr. Oster, would you like to come up to the podium now and speak as to your reasoning?
Yes, thank you. We'd like to request suspension of rules and pass by emergency at the second reading this evening. Couple reasons. First of all, once we're approved, we have to schedule a pre-construction meeting with the city and do certain infrastructure improvements, which is really reconfiguring everything that's already there, which is tedious work for land development contractors because there's a lot of borings under the street and stuff like that. With the housing downturn, a lot of the land development contractors are out of business, and once we get into the spring season, they're all pretty busy doing normal land development activities. So this is just really moving laterals around. It's about $130,000 of, doing improvements. But we just like, it's ideal work to get done late winter. It's tougher for us to find contractors to do this work during the prime land development season. Secondly, which is really not a hardship, it's just my hardship, it's about $110 a day for real estate taxes, so every day that clicks by is costing money, but that's not your issue, that's my issue. And then once we get approval, do what we need to do, which is about 60 to 90 days, then a builder builds a model, which is about another 90 days, and then they start marketing and selling. We're at Christmas time before we're even selling homes out there, so we're just trying to beat any recession that may come or may not come. So, but really the reason I'd like to try to get it passed is, just to be able to get the land development contractors that are available to do the work now before it's busy.
Thank you, Mr. Oster. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Oster? Go ahead.
Is this, and I maybe ask the mayor and the law director, is this a public safety, security, or health issue that we can we suspend rules on this?
I think you can suspend rules, but whether or not the council determines it's an emergency, that's up to council. I mean, you suspend rules all the time, but declaring an emergency would be something that you would have to discuss tonight on the floor of council, why it should be an emergency.
And I also addressed the mayor on that too.
And I don't know what council wants to do about declaring emergency. I can tell you that the city and my office would be willing to do whatever they can to help expedite the project. I mean, I would be willing to meet before this actually passes with a pre-construction meeting at the builder's risk. I mean, he could do and prepare a lot that way. And we could meet ahead of time, and it'd all be contingent on this passing. So, I mean, I would agree to get creative and do anything on my part, but I really truly believe it's up to council to decide whether it's an emergency or
So
not.
you'd be willing to cooperate?
I'd be willing to do
My
anything I
concern
can
is that
possible.
This has gone through unanimously in favor, so that somewhat supports the cooperation that.
Again, it would be all at the builder's risk. If for some reason it didn't pass on the third reading, it would be
Sure,
work he
that's
did
a
for nil, but
possibility if something
I
came
don't
up,
believe it's not gonna
you
pass.
know.
Yeah, and if we can't get it passed by emergency, if the second option would be, could we get it at least adopted at the second reading, and then start the 30-day,
100% up to them. Like I said, I as mayor would work with you to do anything I can to help prepare for this when it's finished.
Okay,
I don't have any further questions.
Mr. Buchback.
Thank you. I would support a passing on the second reading, but not for emergency, for reasons that are stipulated. We're looking at rezoning, and by saying an emergency, there's no opportunity for any repercussions, anybody can come back to the city for any questioning on the property. Especially in light of the mayor going to work with pre-construction meeting ahead of time, I think you should be able to, unless correct me if I'm wrong, still be able to move forward, knowing that it has been passed this evening and enacted in law, even though you have 30 days before it's actually written.
Yeah, and it is not a rezone, so we are currently zoned, it's just a modification of the prior plan.
Right. Okay, that's all, thank you.
Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Mr. President. Having spoke to the to Mr. Oster and the HOA's agreement from North Point Estates, this is not a rezoning. This is, like he stated, this just is a replat. I support Councilman Bukovac's decision, and I'd like to move that we suspend council rules but do not declare an emergency. That'll give 30 days from the time the mayor signs it to, for Mr. Oster and the mayor and the engineers to work out any last minute details before he breaks ground on those utility upgrades. So with that, I'll put the motion out there.
Okay. Do I have a second? Mr. Janik?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor to suspend council rules on item A, so may be passed on the second reading. Any other comments? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Goodell? Mr. Van Kuren?
Yes.
Mrs. Wasilk?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yeah.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Mr. Bukovac?
Yes.
Motion carries. Mr. Van Kuren?
Move to adopt?
Mr. Miller?
Second, please.
Motion and second on the floor to adopt. Roll call vote.
Mr. Goodell?
Yes.
Mr. Van Kuren?
Yes.
Mrs. Wasilk?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Mr. Bukovac?
Yes.
Motion carries.
016-03.
Item B.
An ordinance amending Amherst Codified Ordinances, Section 1149.02, 1149.03, 1149.10, and 1149.11 of Chapter 1149 signs.
Mr. Miller.
Move to take item 7B to its third reading.
Thank you. Ms. Vasil.
Second.
Motion and second on the floor to take item B on to the third reading. Any other comments? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Goodell?
Yes.
Mr. Van Kuren?
Yes.
Mrs. Wasilk?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Mr. Bukovac?
Yes.
Motion carries. That completes item 7. Move on to item 8, ordinances and resolutions, third reading. We have none. Item 9, miscellaneous acknowledgement of the public. Anyone here wishing to speak on any item? Let's go to the podium, sir. State your name and address, please.
My name is Pete Deskins, 45580 Telegraph Road. Excuse me, I've never had any complaint before, so this is all new to me. I'd like to thank everybody for what they do on keeping this community as great as it is and continuing the good work. My issue here is with the building of Dollar General in front of the Amherst Eagles. I'd like for a little more concerns with them bringing their business into our community right there instead of, taking away from other smaller business owners, I guess. We're having easement problems up at the Amherst Eagles with them and their draining. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but water runs down from the road and they want to drain into our pipes there that are already getting full when water comes because of the drainage. So I'd like, whoever to look into that a little more before they just stamp approval on them putting their business there. Also, I had a whole list of things to say and it's just not coming to me right now, but I like to keep this community good and keep the small businesses good, and I like for you guys' support. I understand that it's a commercial property, and I understand we're limited to the things about it, and I don't want to cause no trouble with the council or nothing else, but I'd like for us just to look into a little more before just stamping an approval on their okay.
No, I'm glad you came up.
And my comments, by the way, I want to make it a statement, have nothing to do with representing Amherst Eagles. These are my own. So I don't want to get that. I'm not talking on 1,500 members. I'm just voicing my own opinion.
Well, that's fine. We're glad you came up. That's the only way we know these things. So, Ms. Baselk.
I have a question. Who owned that land?
We used to, the Amherst Eagles used
Well,
to, years ago. We had some trouble with financing. So John Harris now owns the land. Also owns the drive-through and the car wash there.
Okay, so you did not, you sold it at a time when you
I
had.
think it was don't quote me, but I think it was 2004
Okay,
is when it was sold to him.
okay, because I'd heard that you'd owned it and, okay, yeah. Well, I mean, I certainly understand what you're saying, believe me. That's the end of my comments.
Mr. Vanturin?
Thanks for coming and talking with us. I appreciate it. I completely agree with you. I think that this is probably not the most desirable business to be going in there. You mentioned easement problems and drainage specifically.
Yeah.
Have you spoken to the building department, and is the building department the right place to go to, Mr. Mayor?
I can probably answer that
Okay.
question. Mr. Jeffries and I both sit on planning commission. This was discussed at length. We let our engineers, Bramhall Engineering, review these issues, and they assure us the design of their stormwater retention will actually slow the water down from that property, and don't take me verbatim, but I believe there's an underground stormwater retention basin that's going to be built. So any of that water that comes from the parking lot, the building, will go to this basin, and it'll leave with a smaller pipe than what it goes in. So the improvement of the land will actually slow down the stormwater release. So it was looked at by our engineers, and that was a big part of our planning commission meeting.
They were asking to tie into our drainage in the parking lot, and we have not given them an okay on that yet. And we have a lawyer right now talking to their lawyer about it. Some gentleman in Pennsylvania is asking us to be, good neighbors with him on this, but he's not a neighbor as far as I'm concerned when he's just bringing a business into he cares less about this town. So, I was also told when he called, they're gonna be building a baffle system over our, what is it? A certain line, I can't think of it right, what is it?
Utilities.
Yeah, our line, a certain line there, and if it's damaged or if it's ever damaged in the future, we're gonna have to go through what they're building over top. They're going over top of our.
The building itself won't be over any utility lines. A parking lot might, but there'll be an easement, I'm sure, or something worked out, but there is no building over those lines.
Mr. Brookford?
I wasn't,
Oh, I'm
I'm
sorry.
I wasn't done
Sorry,
yet.
Phil.
You also mentioned, just really quickly, the stamping of approval. I just wanted to make sure you understood that we didn't have anything to do with giving any kind of.
Yeah, I'm not educated on the process that has to
That's
go
fine. I just
through.
wanted to make sure you knew that
I
none of us here really said, yeah, this is fine for this to go in.
Right, I understand that. I just wanted to voice my opinion because you guys are our voice, you know.
Understood.
And there was supposed to be 100 people with me, you know. And
And
guess
maybe
they
the
had
law
something else
director
come up.
would be a better person to answer this, but there, I mean, there might be a possibility for council to stop kinds of businesses for coming in. For example, you know, the casino gambling issue that was, the casino game parlors that were big a few years ago. We discussed a ban on them in the city of Amherst. But as for banning, you know, a convenience store or a mini mart like this, I don't know that council has much recourse at all. So really, although I agree with you, I don't know that we have any recourse other than to agree with you, unfortunately.
I guess maybe prolonging, they want to do it real quick. And they told us, hurry up and get your members together, get a meeting together, and get this okay. And it's not that we're prolonging, it just takes a while to go through our organization to get this, you know, in a meeting and okay for the easement. So, and then once that meeting happens, it goes on to, you know, another thing. But they made a comment that because of us prolonging it, he's getting upset, you know, and then we got a lawyer involved and he's even more upset. So if we can just continue to prolong him,
Well,
on our part and on maybe building inspector or somebody else, he will move and take his business elsewhere.
Well, regardless, it's great that you're here, even if we don't have any power to play a role in this, because you're letting us know the situation and letting the administration know the situation. Mr. Law Director, maybe just to clarify for everyone here so we all understand the process a little better, does City Council have any say in this process at all? Is there anything we could do, and anything like that at all?
No, I mean, basically, if I'm not mistaken, this is zoned as C2 district. If that's in the yellow on that map, it's a C2 parcel. If it's a C2 parcel, the permitted uses under 113701 are permitted. And it's just general terms, grocery stores, parking lots, drugstores, restaurants, etc. So you can't specify what type of grocery store or whatever Dollar General is.
So we'd have to ban all grocery stores and
Well, you
or
can't
rezone the property.
You can't say, well, except the Heinz, but not a Dollar General. It doesn't work.
Right.
It doesn't work that way. I mean, that's what it comes down to. We can't pick and choose. The zoning council creates the zoning rules, and look at that map. And if council wants to change things, then they need to look at the map and decide what they want in C1s and C2s and things like of that nature. And no one's ever acted. I don't remember the last time anyone has ever acted on this. Looks like the year 2000, last time council addressed the issue of what's allowed in C2 zoning. So if council wants to look at that, that's up to council, but they haven't done so in 16 years. So
It's a good education, I appreciate it.
yeah. So we all have our opinions on the issue. The city's hands are tied, and we're not going to do anything to impede what's legal. At that point, we're causing a problem. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
That's all.
Please, Mr. Buchberg.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Deskins, for coming down as well. I would like to reiterate what Mr. Van Truren had said. I too do not want a Dollar General there either. That's something that I've grown up in this neighborhood. It's down the street from me. I don't think it's a good fit. But like has been stressed by the law director, it's really not our say. And I think, Mr. Law Director, for us to review the zoning, we'd have a difficult issue to say we don't want Dollar General there either, right? We can't do that as easily as potentially was implied.
Right.
I do have a question for the mayor. Being on the planning commission, and is there anything that came up during the planning commission that you could share with us that maybe was a question mark during the process, or something that might have been something that went through heavy discussion?
The stormwater issue, I mean, we made sure that the stormwater plan is well taken care of. C2, there's absolutely no discussion about what type of business it is, as long as the building inspector has approved the use for that property and brings it to planning commission. That's not part of our discussion because it's nothing we can do about that. We talked about, and the reason we talked about the utility lines that are stretched out from the Eagles building to the road, and that we made sure that the building itself didn't obstruct any of those utilities, so that was part of the discussion. Ingress, egress, traffic studies. We talked about the amount of traffic that a store like that would produce and whether the roads there would handle it. We also talk about whether the emergency vehicles, fire equipment can get in and out of that type of parking lot. So those are the things we talk about at Planning Commission. If it was an industrial zoning, there is certain criteria in certain businesses we talk about in an industrial zone that are allowed and not allowed. But C2, that's not part of our discussion at all, and I don't think we'd be advised to talk about that or deny because of that.
Thank you. In regards to traffic study, was it discussed or is one going to be done?
It was already done, and it was decided that I believe it was less than 60 cars per hour, which for that area was not, and I don't know the exact wording, but the report itself said it's not enough of an impact to do anything different with the street. So it won't change the street traffic enough to warrant another lane or a stoplight or a stop sign. So it wasn't enough of an impact to make a difference.
Thank you. Mr. Law Director, on the issue of zoning, who has the right to request a change in zoning? The property owner, or can council request that?
I think anyone could ask for a change in zoning, but you can't spot zone. I mean, we laid this out, and I guess I shouldn't say, well, council hasn't looked at it since 2000. Well, we haven't done so for a reason. It's been laid out already. And what you can't do is you can't spot zone. You can't all of a sudden create an area that's going to be zoned differently that doesn't match the surrounding areas. So, I mean, our maps are kind of uniform. We have to have some areas that are zoned industrial to accommodate for for instance, adult entertainment. You have to have some area in town that could, for instance, have an adult entertainment establishment. So you have to have industrial. I guess the point is you can't spot zone. You can't.
Sure. And Pete, you and I have talked about this in the past, about this whole issue. Although I cannot do anything here as a councilman, I'd be glad to be any assistance to you as a resident of the community. So let me know what I can do to help.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes.
My name's Mark Heiser. I live at 1202 Orchard Glen. First, I'd like to say I'm neither an Eagle or have I ever met Mr. Deskins before. I've lived in Amherst less than a year, and we did extensive shopping through many, many communities. And I got to tell you, you can easily gauge how depressed the community is by the number of check into cash and Dollar Generals they have. And if your hands are tied with the spot zoning, or we like you but we don't like you, I perfectly understand that. I might suggest you look into the number of Dollar Generals per capita. It's a small town. There's a brand new one right on 58 where it belongs. Do they really need one in the middle of downtown or in the middle of the city? It's just my opinion.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Janet Reed, 361 South Lake Street. I would just like to say that this has been in discussion for at least 9 months. And Eagles had the opportunity to buy the property back. They didn't want it back. Therefore, Mr. Harris has a right to do what he wants to with it. I mean, that's my opinion. What goes in there, he's a small business. It is going to affect him. But they made the statement to him, they're coming there, rather it be there or across the street. And like I say, it was offered back to Eagles. Eagles didn't want it. They voted it down. So, therefore, what are you supposed to do? I mean, I feel if Eagles is not happy and you say you're not representing Eagles.
Yeah, not representing the Eagles at all.
Correct, but I mean,
You're addressing me as I am.
they should have bought the property
We
back.
should have. We were financially unable to do it at that time.
So, that's all I have to say. And I do know they have worked on this water and everything else with the planning committee. They've got it, you know, they've been working on it. And it's, whether it goes there or not, my opinion doesn't matter. If I don't care to shop at that store, I won't.
Thank you, Mrs. Reed. Anyone else? Yes, go ahead.
I don't want this to be taken out of context as I'm representing the Eagles. I'm not, and we were offered that. And John Harris is a good member and a good guy. You know, it's nothing personal to him. So I don't want people to think that. This is me as living in this community my whole life. Okay, and I'm seeing a business come into it and trash it up. And that's what's going on. And we should have some, you know, ability to stop that. So I'm not addressing what the Eagles has anything to do with it. It has nothing to do with that. So I just want to make that clear.
Thank you. Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Mr. President. Boy, there's a few people out there that had some opinions as to this. I would agree with some and disagree with others. Right now, I do want to say a couple things. First of all, I'm not in favor of a Dollar General. What's the third one? I don't know how many we've had that are popping up throughout Amherst. I would agree that that's Mark, and I missed your last name. I apologize. Heiser. I think he said it very well. You can really gauge a community based on the type of businesses that are in there. I think he's spot on there. And with that note, I don't want to see this Dollar General in there. However, I sat at that one of the planning committees. I've sat at a couple of them, but in this particular one, I'm going to go out and say that I was thoroughly impressed with our new mayor and our new safety service, who was sitting on the planning. Both of them were sitting on the planning commissions or planning committees at different times or earlier. They, as well as Mr. Marty and Mr. Anderson and a few others that sit on the committee, they are doing their due diligence, and we have our assistant law director there as well, guiding them. And I'm very confident in their ability to dot the I's and cross the T's. I really was happy when I left that last planning meeting with how they questioned the new business owners that were coming in, and how they had stated their concerns, how they said they wanted a resolution brought to issues. And so I don't doubt the planning commission's abilities, and I'm very happy that they sit there and they are doing a thankless job. Where I think we're missing the boat, and I think this has been for a lot of years, and this is me who grew up here, 46 years ago. We are failing because we don't have a Chamber of Commerce-esque organization that goes outside of Main Street. Main Street is amazing, does a great job for downtown, but we don't have that right now, reaching out to these owners that own property that are zoned for commercial, 1 or 2, industrial, what have you, reaching out to them and saying, let us get into contact with somebody that would bring in a business that would bring up our property values, that would service better our community. And I think that's where we're failing. And I believe that our new mayor is going to probably be addressing that. And I hope he does. And then let me know how I as a councilman and how I as a citizen and how I as an Amherstonian can do what I can do to help you there. Because I think that's where we're failing. This Dollar General would not have been an option if we would have done things with a little bit more vision, a little bit more planning. Instead of just saying, here's what it is, these are the zoned areas, and allowing businesses to come in and take advantage of the opportunity of owners who are looking to make money on their investment. They bought it from the Eagles. Eagles couldn't afford the dollar amount that they gave back to them, and so who can? The big box stores, not the mom and pops, not our little businesses that make Amherst original. And so I'm disheartened over the fact that we don't have that in place. And I think that is something we as a city, whether it be administration, council, or whomever, really need to sit down and figure out, get the key people in place to have this discussion of how could we plan the last bit of those zoned areas in such a way that we are going to have a successful development that is going to really add to our city instead of become what we're seeing in different areas of Amherst. This is an old strip mall, so guess what? We're going to build a new one, and we're going to let that one go empty. And what goes in it, the small businesses that are not able to afford to bring in what I would call the infrastructure upgrades. So this is where we are failing, and I apologize to Mr. Deskins and the rest of our citizens that we could not be a little bit more proactive and bring something other in here other than a Dollar General. I think that Mr. Morris, and he was at that meeting, and I listened to him, I think he would have been happy to see something else besides a Dollar General come in. But that's his investment, and he's looking at it as a citizen and as a business owner on a return on investment. So I understand the situation that he was in. I wish it would have went differently. I hope in the future, what's left up there, we can do a better job with. So with that, I yield the floor back to the President. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. Goodell.
I just want to comment as well that I am not in favor of this type of store coming into Amherst either. I know there's nothing we can do about it, but that's also why I didn't support the gambling establishments either, because I think that draws a unwanted effect to the city as well. But I also agree with Councilman Miller about seeing if there's something, other we can do to bring different types of businesses in here, and I do agree with that. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Mr. Bukovac.
Thank you. I just like to remind Mr. Goodell, we didn't vote on letting gambling in. We were trying to restrict them. We don't have that choice to pick and choose what businesses come in, and we were not voting for gambling back then.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Van Kuren.
One quick comment. I agree with you certainly that the store doesn't, it's not what we want here in Amherst, but I'd also like to say that I agree with you as well, is that the power of our purse or the power of the wallet speaks a lot, and the best thing that any residents who don't want to see it there can do is, well, don't shop there. I'm certainly not going to be frequenting the new Dollar General store, nor will my family members, and I think that the best thing that any residents who don't want to see it there could do is not go and spend their money there. And that's all.
Thank you, sir. Let's move on to item 10, agenda requests and committee meeting schedules.
The first one is Agenda A-15-07. It will go to streets.
A1607?
I'm sorry, A-1607. It's only been a month. Authorization to bid and award the 2016 street rehab program. The next one is A-16-08 to streets. It's authorization to bid and award Cooper Foster Park Road Improvements Phase 2, OPWC 2016. Next one is Agenda A-16-09 for finance. An ordinance authorizing and directing the Safety Service Director to purchase an Altech digger truck for the Amherst Electric Department through the Ohio State Cooperative Purchasing Program at a cost not to exceed $205,000. The next is A-16-10 for finance. An ordinance authorizing and directing the Safety Service Director to purchase a 2.5-ton dump truck for the Amherst Street Department through the Ohio State Cooperative Purchasing Program at a cost not to exceed $145,000. The next is Agenda A-16-11 for utilities. An ordinance authorizing the execution of a contract to participate in the remaining requirement service energy supply schedule with American Municipal Power, known as AMP. And the final one is Agenda A-16-12 for streets, authorization to bid and award this tree trimming maintenance program, and that is complete.
Thank you. Finance, Ms. Vasil?
Yes, I have two items, A-1609, an ordinance authorizing and directing the Safety Service Director to purchase An all-tech digger truck for the Amherst Electric Department through the Ohio State Cooperative Purchasing Program at a cost not to exceed $205,000. And A 16-10, an ordinance authorizing and directing the Safety Service Director to purchase a 2.5-ton dump truck for the Amherst Street Department through the Ohio State Cooperative Purchasing Program at a cost not to exceed $145,000. That is complete, and I would like to call for that meeting at 7 o'clock next week, week from today, 15th.
Thank you. Building and Lands, Mr. Janik.
Yes, Mr. President, we have A-16-11, an ordinance authorizing the execution of a contract to participate in the remaining requirement service energy supply schedule with American Municipal Power. I'd like to request that at 7:10 or immediately following the finance meeting.
Thank you. Streets, Mr. Bukovac.
I have 3 items. A 1607, authorization to bid and award the 2016 street rehab program. A 1608, authorization to bid and award Cooper Foster Park road improvements, phase 2. A 1612, authorization to bid and award the tree trimming maintenance program. I'd like to call the committee for next Monday on the 15th at 7:15 p.m.
Thank you. Community Development, Mr. Goodell.
Nothing at this time, Mr. President, please
Thank
cancel.
you. Executive, Mr. Van Kuren.
Nothing at this time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Ordinance, Mr. Miller.
Mr. President, we have emails coming out to the council members in regards to the upcoming sign ordinance. That is not being recalled, but that is on its way. Please take a look at that in preparation for the next called committee meeting on ordinance signs part 2.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Utilities, Mr. Janik.
No items at this time, Mr. President, please cancel.
Thank you. Recycle, Mr. Miller.
Keep recycling, save a tree. Nothing else.
Thank you. Technology, Mr. Bukovac.
No items, please cancel.
Thank you. Police and Fire, Mr. Winarski.
Nothing at this time, Mr. President.
Thank you. Annexation, Mr. Miller.
Nothing at this time. Please cancel, Mr. President.
Thank you. That completes item 10. Move on to item 11, reports of administration.
Thank you. Mr. Ramsey?
No report.
Thank you. Mr. Bakura?
No report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Jeffries?
No report, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks for making this easy. Thank you. I have just a couple small items. Hearing the recycling committee, we have enacted a paper recycling program citywide now within all our buildings here at the city. We've got a couple small glitches to work out, but the little blue containers showed up today in some of our offices. We're going to get more of those out. If you notice, there's a pretty big agenda for the next committee meetings. I've brought all those items early enough to you so that we don't need the emergency. There's some deadlines, especially with the road program and all, but I won't be asking for emergency on those items. And also, one of my bigger projects is the fiber optic program that I'm hoping to get our city buildings connected. I've asked Mr. Winarski and Mr. Bukovac to be part of those discussions. I really want to thank them for that. And I'll be asking to enact the Technology Advisory Committee and get their input on this item. It's going to be a really big project, and I really appreciate the help. Thank you. In the report.
Thank you. Ms. Purcell.
Move to accept the reports of the
Mr. Bukovac.
Second, please.
Motion is second on the floor to accept the reports of administration. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Reports are accepted. Mr. Miller.
Move to adjourn.
Second,
Mr. Bukovac.
please.
Motion is second on the floor to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? We are adjourned at 8:15.
Did you read